All right, these are notes on section 2.1 conics, which is actually on circles. And a circle is a set of points that are fixed, an equal distance from a fixed point. So you have your center point and all the points that are equal distance. So the standard form of a circle, this is not on your formula sheet, you have to keep this in mind, is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So the center of the circle is the h and the k, and the radius is r. So if I gave you an example and I said the center is 0, 0 and the radius is 8, and I asked you to write the standard form, h would be 0, k would be 0, so I would actually have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 8 squared. And so instead of writing that like that, we would drop the zeros and we would end up with x squared plus y squared equals 64. And it's an equal sign. So another one, if you have a center at 2 and a radius at -1, then you would have x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared equals 16. So it becomes plus 1 because the -1 substituted into this formula, negative times negative is positive. And another example, so this one would be x plus 5 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 3, because if you take the square root of 3 and you square it, you would get 3. So the reverse of that is, what if I want the center and the radius? So in this case, the center would be 0, 2, and the radius would be 4, because r squared equals 4. Oh, I've got this written wrong. R would be 2. Sorry. So r squared is 4, and so that means that r would equal 2. So if I wanted to graph this on my graph paper, I would start at the point 0, 2, and then I would go 2 places to the right, and then 2 places to the left. So I would go 2 to the right and 2 to the left, and then I could go 2 up and I could go 2 down, and then there would be the circle that I would have. So the domain of this circle are the x values. So the domain's going to go from the domain, since my center is at, oh, I just messed this one up a lot. Let's try again. Okay, so the domain, the center of this circle is at 0, 2. I had it right. And then over 2, to the left 2, and then up 2, and then down 2. So my domain is going to go from -2 to +2. I did have this wrong. So from -2 to +2, and the range is going to go from -2 to +6. Okay, on this one, our center is -4, +5, and the radius is 6. If I graph that, what ends up happening is I take the -4 and I add 6, and I take the -4 and I subtract 6. So that's where I come up with the domain of -10 to +2. And then I take the 5 and I add 6, and I take the 5 and subtract 6, and that's where I come up with the range of -1 to +11. And you can always graph these to see it better. On this one, my center is 2, 3. My radius would be square root of 15. And so my domain's a little bit harder to express, but you would say the domain is 2 plus -15, or 2 plus square root of 15 and 2 minus square root of 15. That would be my domain. And the range would be 3 plus square root of 15 and 3 minus square root of 15. So the next examples, we've done quite a few of these, but here's another example. So we're going to solve this, put it in standard form by completing the square. So we want to take the x's and group them together, and the y's and group them together, and we're going to move that 6 to the opposite side, so it's -6. We're going to complete the square now. So half of 6 squared is 9, and half of 2 squared is 1. That gives us a perfect square trinomial, so I can factor this into x plus 3 squared and y plus 1 squared. And then remember, since I added 9 to this side, I have to add 9 to this side. And I added 1 to this side, so I have to add 1 to the other side. So I end up with a 4. So in this problem, my center would be -3, -1, and my radius would be 2. This one's not quite as pretty, but I can still do it. I group together the x squared and the 3x, and I group together the y squared and the 5y, and I move the 9/4 to the other side. When I complete the square, half of 3 squared is 9/4. Half of 5 squared is 25/4. So I had to add 9/4 and 25/4 to both sides. And then squaring my perfect square trinomials, or factoring, I end up with x plus 3/2 squared and y plus 5/2 squared equals 25/4. So on this one, my center would be -3/2, -5/2, and my radius would equal 5/2. So if you converted those into decimals, I'm looking at -1.5, -2.5, and a 2.5 radius. So it's not too bad when you look at it that way, and you're just going to estimate when you graph it. Our next one, when we group it, the x and the 2 go together, and the y squared doesn't have anything to group with it. So it's understood that that's got a +0 in there. And when we complete our square, we get half of 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1. So then I factor that into x minus 1 squared and y squared and the 16. So my center would be 1, 0, 1, 0, and my radius would equal 4. All right, so here's one last example. In this one, you have the center and the radius, and it asks you to write the equation of the circle in standard form. So the center and the radius of the circle, and write the equation in standard form. So, I'm sorry, it says find the center and the radius given 2 points. So to find the center, I need to know the midpoint between these 2 points. So remember, the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. That's our midpoint formula. So to find the midpoint, I'm going to take the 3 and the 7 and divide by 2. And I'm going to take the 9 and the 11 and divide by 2. And I get the center point is at 5, 10. So now the radius would be the distance from the center to either one of these points. So I'm going to do the distance formula, and I did the distance formula with the 7 and the 11. So it's 5 minus 7 squared plus 10 minus 11 squared, and I end up with the radius is 5. So now I know my equation of my circle is x minus 5 squared, y minus 10 squared equals 5. And then here I have another example, same thing. Given 2 points, I'm going to find the midpoint. So I found the midpoint, it was 4, 5. So that's the center of the circle. And then I can use that and one of the points to find the radius. So in this case, our radius equals square root of 2. And then I can write the equation of my circle. Hope this helps.